before we get into more leadership stuff, I want to ask you, why is Nazareth Business School better than St. John Fisher's?
Kenneth, you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, perfect. Ty, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's kick off season 2. Timeout. Tyler, who are we taking a timeout with today?
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's been a while, man, and a happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And today we're taking a timeout with Kenneth Rhee, the Dean of the School of Business and Leadership at Nazareth College. Kenneth, thanks for taking a timeout with us this morning. And start things off, Kenneth, what is the best movie of all time?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of your show. I heard fantastic and glowing reviews about what you both do. So it's my privilege to be here with you today. So I'm looking forward to having a fun time for next hour or so. And so to respond to your first question, well, there are quite a few, but if I have to pick one, I think I'll go with Chariots of Fire.
Ooh, okay. That's a movie
I
I have
when I
only
was
seen
young.
bits and pieces of. So that's
well,
a good...
fantastic music to go with the movie. But the just the premise and the just depicting the people with different background and they're striving to achieve excellence and the process to get there. I think it's really fascinating.
Well, now Tyler and I have to add that to the watch list.
We might have to pop some popcorn, watch a little Chariots of Fire this weekend.
Sure.
So Kenneth, like Tyler just said, we just got through Thanksgiving, one holiday, and I know my waistline is already feeling it. But what did you go back for seconds for at the Thanksgiving table?
This year was an exception because I pretty much spent the Thanksgiving on my own this year. But previous years where we had folks here, second, probably more turkey.
Okay, all right. There's some turkey haters around my table.
I usually go for a drumstick. Unless there are others who wants it, then I will basically, give up my drumstick. But I'll go the first one, and maybe if nobody wants it, I'll go for the second drumstick.
No, that's I love turkey by myself. Who's breaking the wishbone though in your family?
Typically my wife.
Where do y'all usually have Thanksgiving, Kenneth?
Where? Usually here. Sometimes we have family coming over here. This year, unfortunately, we couldn't get together. My wife is away. She's teaching at Wisconsin, and so she couldn't make it back. So it was kind of very different Thanksgiving. But with what's happening with COVID and everything else, I think everyone wants to be more careful.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think I saw that. Did you go to Wisconsin lacrosse?
Yes, I did. So
my AAU coach in basketball went to Wisconsin lacrosse. He was about a 5'10" redhead guy who taught me how to shoot the 3-ball like a maniac. And he would just have this. I was down in Arkansas, and he had this crazy accent to us. And we were like, "Who is this alien?" He's maybe 5'10", red hair, but could just fill it up. And always mentioned Wisconsin lacrosse and the Packers, every day at practice. But
Packers, if you're not a Packers fan and living in Wisconsin, there's something wrong with you. Here's a little trick I learned. So if you want to go shopping or do something and avoid the crowd, but go there when Packers are playing, because nobody will be there because everybody will be watching the game. So that's a little secret.
That's a little trick. A little trick of the trade.
Little trick. Actually, I have a funny story to go with it. One time, my supervisor, my dean, I was associate dean at the time, she actually scheduled a reception, and I still don't know why, but she scheduled it right before the Packers game. Well, guess what? a lot of people didn't come, and even those people who came left right away because they don't want to miss the Packers game. So
we had actually a lot of fans, though, are the nicest fans in football. I have heard that. They
yes,
graciously take their losses as well as you're leaving the exit from the stadium. Now, some would say, are a bit of a journeyman, Kenneth. You also were out at working at Wisconsin lacrosse as well. And then I saw also down in Kentucky. But now you're here in Rochester working at Nazareth, one of the most prestigious higher education schools in our area. What the heck is your favorite thing about Rochester?
Rochester. I think the people. I think people tend to be very friendly, and I enjoy meeting a lot of people. I think that Rochester has that kind of big city opportunities, but with the small city, the sentiment or the feeling of being in a small city. And one thing I learned is that people know everybody. Once you make a connection, it leads to other people. So even though we're not a very small town, it feels like we're living in a small town. So it really has the best of both. And I used to joke to people that the lacrosse, we don't have an Apple store. So I'm a big Apple fan. I use a lot of Apple devices. So if I have to buy something, I couldn't go down to the store just grab it. Whereas here now I could. So that's a huge advantage of being in Rochester.
Don't get too attached to those shopping centers because they might not be around for long.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Kenneth,
it's like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, Kenneth, I wanted to ask you, at what age were you when you decided and knew that you were going to be a dean? Because, like, in my mind, I'll never be a dean. That just is so out there to me for my skill set, right? Let's just say that. Like, when did you say, hey, I'm Kenneth Rhee and I'm going to be a dean?
Let's see, not too long ago, maybe 2016. So prior to that, I was directing executive program, and I was working with students, working with the program, working with the stakeholders outside the university, and I was very happy running the program. And then some of my colleagues came to me and said, Ken, you've done a great job managing the program, helping students. When are you going to be a dean? I said, well, I'm very happy in terms of what I'm doing. So why should I be a dean? And one of them says, well, think about it this way. Right now, you're actually helping a number of people within your program, but the people outside the program is not benefiting from your leadership. Think about how much more impact you can have. Being a dean, you can impact the entire college or the school of business. So I started thinking about that and realized that perhaps they are correct in thinking that I can do more to really contribute to people's growth and their development by becoming a dean. So I became a dean not because I want to grab the power or I want to have that status or have the corner office, so to speak. But I became a dean because I thought perhaps I could help more people, students, faculty, and others, stakeholders outside the college. So that really became the driving force. And when I look at my entire career, I realized that unless I make a switch, I may not have the opportunity. So that's really what triggered me to seek out a dean's position.
That's awesome. And that corner office doesn't hurt at all, does it? I'm always fascinated talking when we get to talk to people in education, right? Because you get to theoretically see some of the workforce before they enter the workforce, right? You get to see their development, kind of where their priorities are, where are they focused today. So I have to ask, over the 4 years, you got to see pre-pandemic, now post-pandemic students as well. Mm-hmm. Do you see, being that you've had such a long history in working in leadership, and mind you, a bachelor's degree in chemistry, like I have a bachelor's degree in biology, but have you seen a generational difference in leadership styles as well as like emotional intelligence? Is it taught or is it nurtured?
Well, I think it was definitely nurtured. Now, some people may assume, well, it's you're born with it because, you may have developed something when you're young and you haven't seen people going through the process of development. So, if you run into somebody who says, wow, so-and-so is such great, outstanding, but you haven't seen how that person developed over time. So you're actually seeing the end result, not the starting process. So, think about a baby. Does baby demonstrate emotional intelligence? Maybe some, maybe not. But obviously, as you grow up, you got exposed to different opportunities, and then you have opportunities to learn and develop. People may not have seen that. They only see the result at the end and assume that, oh, you must have had this for a long time or you're born with it. But people develop leadership. And I usually tell people leadership is probably the most unnatural act we can do as a human being. Because if you think about the evolutionary path of human beings, I mean, we start out thinking we have to preserve ourselves. So looking out for self-interest, looking out for number one is our first priority. If you're dead, obviously, what's the point, right? So the survival instinct is what drives us. So that means we're looking out for our self-interest or self-preservation. But to be a great leader, you have to give that up because it's not about you. You are actually working to help others. So your priority is no longer you. Your priority is others. So to me, that is a completely shift away from our evolutionary background. That rather than looking out for oneself, looking out for self-preservation and interest, you are now looking out for others' interests, looking out for. Now, there are many leaders, quote unquote, who doesn't do that. And obviously those are not very effective or outstanding. So I'm talking about people who are really great leaders. Mm-hmm. And if you look at those people, the common theme you always come across is that they're looking out for others first, rather than themselves. Mm-hmm. And that to me is a huge differentiator between somebody who is truly outstanding versus somebody who's not. But it really goes against our human nature.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, when I learned that,
those experiences, that's fascinating.
Absolutely. And what a good feeling that is. I've had a little experience when I caught a glimpse of, oh my gosh, I don't have to worry about myself all the time. All right. I can take that piece of cake and eat it, and just to see what you can give to others. And all of a sudden a tidal wave comes back to you, really. And then you kind of start seeing this chemistry of people all getting together and working together, helping each other out. It's fascinating. And it's awesome to see, people a lot more prominent than Tyler White doing that, out there. And then because once you've done it, you know that language, I want to say,
Sure.
you pick up on certain things people are saying because you've been there. You're like, I know exactly what that guy's saying right now, or that lady's saying, because my butt's been on the front line of that before. And I just wanted to ask you real quick, Kenneth, before we get into more leadership stuff, I wanted to ask you, why is Nazareth Business School better than St. John Fisher's?
Is it a bit of a rivalry?
Yeah, well, obviously, we are friendly rivals.
All right.
The history behind the two schools. At one point, you have a men's school, women's school. So we are very looking out for different target audience, so to speak. But obviously now we are competing with each other directly because we are, both co-ed. Probably the biggest difference I see is the Nazareth School of Business and Leadership. Not just comparing with St. John Fisher, but any other business school, we are different in a sense that we focus not just on business knowledge and skills, but we focus on human factor, human skills. And that's the reason we renamed the school from School of Business or Management to School of Business and Leadership, because we want to focus on both. And I think that is a distinguishing factor for our business school, is we're really looking at the convergence of business and humanity. And that, I think, differentiates us from any other business school that you might come across. And I think in terms of the future of business, and I talked about the convergence of technology, business, and human factor. And those three areas tend to converge. But when you look at what's happening in business environment these days, people seems to be focused so much on either business or technology, but ignoring the human factor. Always. And I really think the key to future success is the human factor. Think about talent management, talent recruitment, talent retention. I mean, that's a key factor in your success of your business. How can you be successful if you don't have the right talent working for you? So, being able to integrate the human factor into business and technology is going to be the key to success for the future. So that's where we position ourselves. And that's how we differentiate us from the rest of the other business schools.
Awesome.
I'll stand on that soapbox with you, skills? Tyler, and everybody else. That's really what we get to see. That's what separates great companies from average to poor organizations. And it is that understanding of the correlation between your human capital and financial capital, that there is a real relationship there. It is our number one business expense, but we can't keep trying to apply other business practices like Lean Six Sigma to something that's so much different than just a process or a production, let's say. One of the things that I always wanted to talk about with you is understanding how you get leadership comfortable with change, right? How do you teach that it is a constant evolution, right? I mean, 20 years ago, businesses had the luxury that there was more employees than jobs, right? And now that has kind of shifted, right? The organizations that have focused on talent attraction, retention, development, and engagement are not seeing the amount of turnover that these other organizations are seeing. How do you get leaders comfortable with change? Because I see people so paralyzed from the fear of change that it actually causes more detriment in the long run.
Yeah, sure. I think the Mark Twain actually says something which kind of echoes the sentiment of many people. Yeah, he once said, "I'm all for progress. I'm just not for change." So basically, people, say, yeah, we want to change, but a lot of times when you're faced with actual change, people tend to behave in a way that's different from what they're espousing. So, and to me, effective leadership or outstanding leadership is really equate to change. Think about it, the definition of leadership. You're leading people to somewhere. Well, where do you lead people to? Well, you lead people to, hopefully, new vision, the frontier, and where, people wants to go in the future. So when you are doing that, I think the change is part of being a leader. So to me, leadership and change go hand in hand. And I cannot see change happening without effective leadership. I cannot see effective leadership without change. So they really are, it's like, think about the coin. You got two faces, right? So front and back. And so leadership and change is really in the same coin. So that's how I see leadership and change. In fact, if I could just do a little promo, we actually, Nazareth College, the School of Business and Leadership, has a graduate program called Leadership and Change. And that program came about is a lot of the programs, graduate programs, especially MBA programs, aren't really focused on leadership and change. So we actually created a program that's dedicated toward developing leadership and giving those leadership the skills to be an effective change agent or change facilitators. So we have a brand new program on leadership and change.
Love that. That is fantastic. Well, whose idea was it to add leadership instead of management, like most business schools, to the title of what was it? School of Business and Leadership. Was that all you, Kenneth?
Yeah, I think the idea came from a lot of different people. I facilitate the process of change, and we all came to a consensus that this is something that we wanted to do. It doesn't matter who came up with the idea. I think the key factor is that we all bought into the process, and everyone worked together to make it happen. And to me, that's the key.
And now I see why you're the dean of the Nazareth Business School, because you have unbelievable ability to check your ego and bring together other people and share that excitement. One of the things that I've been focusing on and I always have, is the difference between positive and negative words, or just words in general. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think the words people choose to use really shows their real intention of what they're saying. I assume, obviously, in the leadership and the business development side that you guys are doing there at Nazareth, that communication and language is probably one of the areas of focus, because without it, you are unable to really build trust with those people that you need them to trust you the most, right? Mm-hmm. In order to get the final result. What types of tips are you giving leaders on properly communicating with their superior, whether it's their peers, whether it's their subordinates, whatever it might be? What types of tricks are you telling people from a communication and word selection perspective today? Because it is very different than it was before.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you use the word tricks, because to me, probably the best way to communicate is be authentic.
Correct.
Transparent, and be honest as much as you can. So I think the being authentic is the key. And, my wife tells me this all the time. It's not what you say, but how you say it. So obviously the way you craft your language is very important. But if I can add one more to that, so it's being authentic and being able to communicate the way, the appropriate way to communicate, but also behave in a way that's consistent with what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I always talked about leading by example. And people always ask me, when I was leading a leadership program in the past, what is the most difficult aspect of being a director or being a dean? Is really leading by example, because it's easier to say things to people, but to enact your words to match that. I call it having that integrity, meaning the consistency between what you say and how you behave is really the difficult aspect of being an effective leadership. So that's probably the most difficult part of my job, because, we all are human beings, right? So we're not infallible. So we make mistakes. We do things, not sometimes we make mistakes and do things that's not very desirable, but the key thing is we try to be as consistent as possible, maintain our integrity between what we say and what we do. Has all that to be success when it comes to leadership.
Absolutely. That leading by example, actually doing the work, is where it's at. People seem to tend to that more than being preached to, I in my experience.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And I was going to ask you, Kenneth, if I was a young leader out there, change is a big word. I think you could just blow it out of proportion, mm-hmm. I think, and get so far ahead of yourself maybe. And what is your advice to a young leader on just kind of where to start if they're owning a business, of 30 to 50 people, and where would you start without just, eating the whole elephant all at one time, like a guy like me would try to do, and probably fail my way back into saying, hey, we got to, and almost maybe to the key of like, what we have right now ain't that bad if we do it right. Like that's another thing I always think about, it's the other side of change. It's like, well, if I am so grateful for everything I have right now and treat people perfect and do the next right thing, why should I change? Mm-hmm. Then I'm trying to change something bad. So I have a pendulum in my skull, if you can't see, if you can't tell, on which way to go sometimes. Because sometimes I'm so grateful that I'm right here. I do the next right thing. I treat the person with integrity, all this good stuff. Then I'm trying to change at the same time. Why would I want to change that? Mm-hmm. So can you kind of iron that out for us?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I could contribute to what you're asking. One, I think the change is inevitable. I mean, change is going to happen. So either you could embrace it and be proactive about it, or you could try to resist and fight until it's too late. Think about all the nations, or companies that cease to exist because they refuse to change or refuse to adapt. Right. So, to me, one aspect of outstanding leadership is being proactive with change. That you don't wait until the last minute and try to change because you have to. You do it because you anticipate what may happen in the future, and proactively adapt you or your organization for the future. I think that's really the key to sustainability in the long run, that you can be sustainable as an organization if you can continue to do so. And second thing is, you talked about young people starting out. Where do you start? I would say start with yourself. One of the key skill any outstanding leaders demonstrate is self-awareness. So being more aware about who you are, what your strength might be, what are the areas you may need to change. I think that's really the first step. It has to start with oneself. There is actually a famous Chinese saying that actually said, it goes something like this. It's a kind of rough translation, that before you can manage the entire world, you have to learn how to manage your country. Before you can manage your country, you have to learn how to manage your city. Before your city, you have to manage your town. Before you can manage your town, you have to learn how to manage your family. But before you can do that, you have to learn how to manage yourself. So I think really starts with self is the starting point for any type of leadership development. Because when you think about it, if you don't know about yourself, how can you be an effective leader leading other people? So I think it's really the starting point is self. If you start with that, expand to focusing on others after that, that's going to be highly successful.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think you're on mute, Kevin.
Oh, well, no, what I'm trying to say.
No, I love I loved your piece about talking about having the foresight, right? I see a lot of people, if they refuse to adapt, they refuse to change because they're constantly functioning in this state of organized chaos. And it's like, if you're constantly in that firefighting mode, it's hard to look down the road, right? It's like, I need to do this and we have to do this. And you can't, it always seems like you can't get ahead. And sometimes change is less scary, right? If we take that proactive stance and futuristic look to predict maybe future challenges and problems that we have. And this is how I coach HR professionals, is that they need to be having similar conversations with the CEO about the business goals and the business strategy, because people need to be behind that strategy in order to pull that off. But without that foresight, then it requires organizations to make massive changes that are highly ineffective instead of micro corrections. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I think that's a common phenomenon I see in many organizations. They tend to wait till the last minute and they're forced to change. And usually when that happens, rushing to get stuff done, and you tend to ignore the right process. So the outcome is not going to be very effective. One thing I've learned over the years is that if you execute using the right process, you are more likely to achieve the right outcome. Whereas if you ignore the process and only focus on the outcome, chances are you're not going to achieve the outcome that is desired by you. So I always use the example of putting when you play golf. You don't just focus on the hole and says, okay, I'm going to get my golf ball into the hole. You have to really think about the entire process of looking at the shape of the green, the speed, everything else. If you get all those things, the right information into the process, and then you putt, then it's kind of automatic that the ball will go into your hole. But if you ignore the process and only focus on the hole, then chances are it's not going to go in. So I think it's really important to focus on the right process. But when when things are at the last minute, chances are you're not going to be able to do that because a lot of different factors comes to play, and you tend to rush through things, and as a result, you're not going to get the outcome you desire. So I think it's important to be proactive, and I also talk about self-disruptions. How do you, as an organization, Tyler, you talked about being comfortable. Why should I change? Well, a lot of times you have to be self-disruptive. Think about, I use Apple as one example. When you look at how they innovate, sometimes they make changes, even though they're not being forced to. Think about this is a long time ago. This might indicate how old I am, but think about the floppy disk. When we used to use floppy disks, and which company actually changed that to 3.5 from 5.25? Apple. Which company that actually got rid of the floppy disk altogether? Apple. Were they forced to? No, other companies weren't doing it, but they did it. They were the first one to do that because they
attribute that to innovation and like the culture itself. What do you attribute that?
Yeah, well, I think innovation is the part of the process, but innovation happens because you're willing to self-disrupt. That you're willing to take that risk to say, okay, we're going to make a change happen, even though we're not forced to, because it's the right thing to do, or it's the wave of the future. And if you recognize where the future might be going, let's do that now instead of waiting 5 years down the road that where everybody's doing it. Let's do it first.
That's Tyler and I've been joking about it all the time. It's just like the sign-on bonus where we're only drawing people in from a compensation standpoint. It's lack of creativity, in my opinion. It's lack of understanding, really. And like you said, sometimes we focus on the end result, the end goal so much that we forget what it takes to actually properly build the foundation necessary to support that goal or that result.
Yeah, just to add to what you just said about compensation, money is important, but people are not just looking for money. They're looking for the right environment to work in, where they feel empowered. They feel they can be creative and be able to have autonomy to do things that makes a difference in what they do and make an impact for people within the organization and for the organizations and their customers and clients. So it's not just about saying we just have to pay people more and they'll come. No, you have to create a right environment where people wants to come, be part of your organization. Creating an inclusive environment is another thing that if people wants to be part of your organization, they want to belong, they want to be participatory, but then you have to have that type of environment. Money can go so far.
That's exactly so it gets people out of bed there, Golly.
I know I've been lied to a couple times in some job interviews too. Told one thing and something else is totally and that's what I think some organizations that are trying to discount the work necessary, which is hard work. They're trying to almost present it as something other than what it actually is. So that's fascinating.
And I always talk about kind of tipping point. Money is important, obviously. But at some point, it's not going to matter to people. If you make a certain amount of money, you say, I'm going to look at other factors as well as just money. So now I always advise my new students when they graduate, because they tend to be young and they tend to look at money compensation as the primary factor. And I've seen so many cases where students graduate, take the job that pays them the most, and then 6 months later, they're looking for a new job again. And I usually ask them what's going on because, I don't like the company. I don't enjoy the environment. So I always tell the graduate, money is important, but look at how good is your fit with the organization that you're in. Is the organization allow you to accomplish things that you want to accomplish? Is the organization make you feel empowered to do things that you need to do, to feel alive and feel that you can develop yourself? If not, money can go so far. So
I totally agree with that. And I think that's why my culture is so elusive for a lot of organizations to kind of get their head around, right? Because it's ever changing. It's constantly evolving. It's never a check of the box. One of the things that I've noticed, and sometimes it's done maybe purposefully or unknowingly, is we have the ability, leaders tend to gravitate towards people that they have similarities with, or see commonality with. But also that they're typically not challenged, and if they're not self-challenging themselves and they're surrounding themselves with middle-tiered managers and senior leadership that are just yes people, how do we break that? How do we break that tradition of, well, let me fight that human nature of my own to gravitate towards somebody that I have similarities with, and they're going to never challenge me, in order to get the innovation, to get to where we need to be as an organization, where we can't be just status quo.
Yeah, I think obviously diversity is very important. So you have to think more about the type of people that you're going to be surrounding yourself with. So that becomes a very important part of having that diversity. But in addition to that, you have to create a safe environment for people to voice their opinions. Even though you have a diverse group of people, but if you create a kind of dictatorial environment where everybody has to say what you want to hear, then, or people are afraid to say what you need to hear, well, then you're not going to get the desired impact or effect. So you have to create a safe environment for people to be able to voice their different opinions and be able to, create a scenario where you are getting very diverse ideas from your team or the group that you are working with. So that's really the key is, yes, you want to attract people who are diverse, but at the same time, you need to create an environment where they feel okay to be diverse. For instance, if I walk into a meeting, I'm the boss, and you say, well, this is the way it's going to happen. Any questions? Well, people are going to say, maybe not. Okay. Well, since nobody objects, we're going to go ahead.
Great idea. Yeah.
But if you walk in thinking, okay, do you have any ideas about this particular issue, and you are the last person to speak, well, people may feel more comfortable to speak up on ideas. And if you pattern that, keep using that process, then after a few times, people are going to feel it's like, okay, I guess I have freedom to say things. And, there is no preset decision that's been made by the leader. So it's important for us to have that conversation where diverse ideas may come across. And I always tell people, best ideas can come from anyone. It doesn't have to be from me as a team leader or my leader of the organization. So I love to hear from everyone. So I usually tend to ask people first before I speak, because if you speak first, chances are you are, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you are actually biasing people because they know what you're thinking. And there is a power differential. So, chances are they're going to be, unless you have a type of people or environment where they're free to disagree with you, chances are they're not going to speak up. They're just going to say, yeah, great idea, boss.
Yeah. And then the leadership almost has an altered state of reality of the actual health of the organization too, because they're only being told what they want to hear. Not what
exactly
they should hear. I love that. Tyler.
Yeah, actually, just give you a quick example. A couple of institutions ago, when I first started to work there, I was told that, well, don't say this to so-and-so, don't say this to the president. I said, why not? Because, well, he only want to hear positive news. So pretty soon, everybody's not saying anything that's issues or problems. Only thing that's communicating upward is positive. So the president actually had a purview or perspective of everything is going great, everything is rosy, and there are no problems. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So that's an example of how something like that could impact what you're hearing as a leader. So sometimes you have to, reach out to people and get a pulse of the organization, not just rely on your VPs or people that report directly to you, because that may be filtered by whatever the customs or culture that may exist in the organization.
That is that's awesome. And I think having like that feeling of having a muzzle on your mouth might be the worst, you know, especially when you feel it in your gut that something's just not right. And you're just kind of a bobblehead agreeing with everything. I mean, it's just so nice to hear it justified from you, Dean. This is making my morning that much better. And I was gonna
You're not as crazy as you thought.
That's right.
I have to bite my own head off sometimes, you know, not with my company now, but just in my past life, you know, you're just sitting there like, is something wrong around here? Because my body is getting hot, you know. But I was thinking about purpose. We were kind of hitting on a little while ago, you know, getting out of bed with a purpose, being empowered, you know, actually making a difference. Where did you find your purpose, Dean Kenneth? Like, do you have any best practices for us the younger generation out there on that true meaning of purpose and what it really means to find it? Because I'd just love to know your experience.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to spend some time reflecting about, you know, what motivates you, what drives you, and, you know, what is purpose behind what you do. And I think it's important for every person to be engaged in the process and trying to figure out, you know, what is your purpose. And, you know, these are one of the popular concepts people talk about these days is purpose-driven leadership. And it's a new concept people talk about, but
is it a new keyword?
It's just a new keyword. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's one thing you discover, that people come up with new things and as if this is something new, brand new, and nobody has thought about it before. But people have been, you know, doing this for a long time. Leadership is not new. Ever since we're born, going back to the human history, you know, the leadership is there. I mean, you know, the minute one person decide to collaborate with somebody else and form a group or community, well, that's where the leadership comes from. So, you know, it's been there for a long time. So, you know, nothing is really brand new. And, you know, because the human beings haven't really changed. Fundamentally, I think we're pretty much the same creatures that, you know, our forefathers have been. So I think it's important for us to recognize that regardless of what terminology that we use, I think it's important to recognize that there is a fundamental basis for what makes our life meaningful. So it doesn't have to be leadership. You could be doing something different, but you have to have a purpose in what you do. I mean, why do you get up in the morning, as you said, go to work or do something? There has to be some purpose or the meaning behind what you do. And people have done research and found out, even people who think that, yeah, people are doing repetitive work, you know, working in a factory, creating a widgets. But even those people, you know, what we have discovered is that they wanted to see there's a purpose behind what they do. And that if you want to make them contribute toward the betterment of the organization, they have to feel that they're doing some meaningful work. It's not just cranking out widgets and making money for the organization. There has to be something meaningful, whether you're creating something that can benefit the customers, saving lives, or doing something that your organization is doing or your product is doing. I think that has to have some meaning behind their work.
Yeah, my grandfather always he used to work for a large manufacturer. So you talked about widgets, and he too said what he showed the people on the line was that their product was going into airplanes that are above their head that people were riding every single day. So the quality needed to be there to really protect the lives. And he said that that's when he saw a new connection to the business of people, because sometimes they get into the day of, like you said, you get into the action, you're just doing action. You're just doing a process. You really have no idea where that product's being shipped to, where you're going to have a potential impact until the business sometimes helps connect those dots. We talk about going through trauma, right? We all experience the same trauma going through the pandemic. And leadership is now at this point where they have to change because everybody kind of went through the same experience. And it seems like hard lines in the sand, and people trying to tell people what they're going to do is having the adverse effect. It used to be effective, and now it's highly ineffective and causes people to kind of speak with their feet and head for the exits. How are you educating leadership on their own evolution here post-pandemic? We've heard terms like emotional intelligence now, like that's at a forefront. We talked about emotional diversity on your boards and on your senior leadership teams. We're hearing terms and like you, it's like almost I sit back and like, what's the new keyword that we're going to come out that some new leadership guy is going to write a book and it's all about this style. But fundamentally, if we went back to what we learned in kindergarten, that's pretty much what everybody's saying. It's like, check your ego, be able to speak last. I love that. Listen more, all of these types of things. But where are we headed? Where is leadership headed? Where's the future of work headed in your estimation?
I think the last, it's almost 2 years now since we had that lockdown, March of 2020. I remember sitting in my office one day and next day, boom, I'm back at home working virtual. So it just happened just like that. And then, of course, we're still going through the pandemic. It's not over yet. And, we have a new variant starting and now people are starting to panic again. So, this can drag on for a while. I mean, I was hoping that by this fall, things would get better, but, Delta basically scrapped the idea of being better again. And now we have another variant coming along, and who knows what's going to happen in 22. So, it's going to be very interesting looking at how things will happen. And I think the way we work is forever changed as a result of the pandemic. Now, I was telling some folks the other day that everything we talk about, it was there before the pandemic. Meaning, think about technology. Zoom was there before the pandemic. People are doing things remote, virtually. But what pandemic has done is that it just accelerated the rate of change. And I think it's forever changed the way we work. I have people telling me they're not going to go back to work if they have to be there 5 days a week full time, physically. I have seen people say, I want to have more flexibility the way I work. And some people are saying, is 40 hours a week, is that still valid? Perhaps, why should I be working, 40 hours if I can get my work done in 30 hours? It used to be that the time was the basis for your work. So, I call it input and output. People always look at the input. How many hours have you spent? Well, you spent 40 hours. Okay, good. We'll pay you for 40 hours. But now I think people are starting to look at, well, what's the output? Well, if you can get the same work done in 30 hours, well, why should you work 40 hours? Maybe you should only 30 hours. So I think these are the type of questions that's going to be raised by employees, the workers saying, hey, wait a second. I think that we have to change the way we do the work. Well, that means change in leadership. The management or leadership has to figure out, it's like, okay, the way we look at things in the past. I was talking to one of the managers, and he says the biggest struggle he had during the pandemic is he cannot check on people because they're all remote. So he doesn't know whether people are doing their work or not, because when he was at work, he could just walk around and see what people are doing. But now he has no idea what people are doing at home. Well, I said, well, why do you need to know? Don't you see what they're producing? I mean, why don't you check their outputs? As long as they're getting their work done, who cares? If they take a half-hour break, who cares? As long as they're getting their work done, that should be one you should focus on, not care about. Not, oh, is this person putting in 8 hours a day? So I think it's shift for some managers, because especially the managers that are focusing on control, rather than empowerment. I think it's a significant shift for those people in the post-pandemic era, that to go from controlling everything to letting go of everything. I think that's going to be the key shift for some managers. And some people are already shifting, some are resisting. You know, I had one manager telling me, I'm trying to wrap my head around all these changes that's going on. It's like, well, forget about wrapping your head around. It's already happened. So move on. You know, you have to shift. So
catch up.
That's awesome.
But I think this is not uncommon. I heard people talk about this all the time these days. And I really think that the leadership has to really rethink about how you measure people's work, or how you monitor people's work. And that's going to be very different. So I talked about going from inputs to output. Forget about 8 hours a day. Think about what are you expecting them to produce at the end of the day, and however they do that, who cares?
Yeah.
But I think for some people, because they are still used to that input mentality that you have to be here 8 hours a day in order to be productive. Yeah. And to me, that's an old way of doing things. I think that the new age, post-pandemic, is going to be very different. So if the companies are slow to adapt, I think they're going to lose more talent as a result.
I agree with you. I think the old way, we need to re-envision Henry Ford's 8 to 5 work schedule, because it was effective for manufacturing, but is it as effective in sales? Is it as effective in all these other industries in which we see? And the first company to offer a 4-day work week in upstate New York will probably have a line of people lining up at their door. So it is going to take more outside the box and creative thinking. And thanks to you, we have unbelievable education systems that you are educating and coaching the future leadership to have a more worldly view of business, that it's not all about profits at the end of the day. It's about purpose. It's about your people. So Kenneth, I just wanted to say thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of the show with Tyler and I. This was awesome. I learned a ton and a lot of great tidbits of advice out there for leaders that are looking to get into leadership, are already in leadership, that change. And one of my favorite pieces was always speak last. So thank you so much for the conversation today, Kenneth. And hopefully I can come see you on campus one day and see that corner office.
Yeah, sure. Sure, anytime. And thank you once again. Thank you for inviting me. And really, it's been great speaking with you. And hopefully it will be helpful to you and others as they're watching the podcast. Thank you.
Awesome, Kenneth. It was nice to meet you. I got to run, y'all. Have a good day.
All right.
Take it easy, Tyler.
Thanks very much.